Oregon's got a good chance to wind up 12-0. What would stop that from happening?
You are Locked On Ducks, your daily podcast on the Oregon Ducks. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, it is that time once again for Locked On Ducks. I'm your host, Spencer McLaughlin. Thank you so much for making this your first listen or your first view of the day. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day and your number one source to stay up to date with the Ducks. Today's episode brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. Place your first $5 bet and you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Loaded Tuesday show, as always. Special teams chatter later. Why can't Oregon figure that out? Dan Lanning is making a jump from last season, and that's a great thing to see. All coming up on today's show. But we start with the prospect of Oregon going 12-0. I predicted that before the regular season. I have not come off of that prediction yet. However, I am here to tell you, shocking though this may be to understand for my everydayers out there, not every prediction I've ever made has come to pass. I know. I'm as surprised as you are, maybe even more. Notice in my intro, though, I didn't say what, or I didn't say who would stop Oregon from going 12-0. I said what would stop Oregon from going 12-0 in the regular season. They're going to be favored in each of their next 5 games. And look, they've got a couple of notable road contests at Michigan, who's a very good team in the trenches, at Wisconsin, who has been playing much better football. They've got Illinois this week in a top 20 showdown at Autzen Stadium, but I was very intentional with my language, and I made that small mistake, and it's going to bug me for the next, 18 to 72 hours, but don't worry about it. I'll be okay. The what is how I am approaching this, because any of these teams in theory could do it. But I think if Oregon were to lose one of their next 5 games, it would look something like this. You take away Oregon's ability to control the game with the run, and outside of Oregon State, I don't really feel like Oregon has done that. The running game has been good. It is solid. But right now, not everything, but the majority of Oregon's explosion plays are coming in the passing game. And a lot of their offensive firepower seems to be going through Dillon Gabriel. It's not as if the run game is a weakness, but if someone's going to beat Oregon, I think what it looks like is you take away the running ability, which has been good, not great, but it has been good, and then Dillon Gabriel has an off day. And yeah, Oregon's defense is still really good and hard to score points on. But there are some capable offenses. I don't know exactly, haven't done a deep dive once again on Wisconsin, but I've watched some Washington games this year. They've got a good veteran quarterback and capable wide receivers. Luke Altmaier, who Oregon is playing this weekend on Saturday at Autzen Stadium, he's playing really good football this season. So if you just find enough points, I don't think that there is a team that gets into a shootout. I think Oregon's defense is too good. So if Oregon gets upset sometime in their next 5 games, I don't think it happens because someone put up 35 points when you wouldn't expect them to. I think it looks more like the Idaho game, where Oregon's not able to run the ball, and maybe Dillon Gabriel is effective, but you have a couple of execution problems. Maybe the special teams have a disastrous moment in the game. That's what I'm kind of looking for coming down the stretch, is can Oregon be a more consistent running team? Can they be more consistently explosive? I haven't been disappointed in the rushing attack. It definitely has not been as good as it has been at times in recent years. So that's what I think it would look like, is if someone's going to beat Oregon, I think you take away the rushing attack and you hope Dillon Gabriel has an off day and maybe makes a mistake in a red zone, because I think this Oregon defense is far too good. I'm going to talk about that later on today's show, but I still feel good about Oregon's prospects of going 12-0, but I just got to thinking, like, if that doesn't happen, what do you think that looks like? What do you think? I don't think it would be, if, God forbid, Washington were to come into Autzen Stadium and win, Will Rogers going toe-to-toe with Dillon Gabriel in a shootout and, Washington wins the game 41-38. I think more likely it would be, whether it's Washington or Wisconsin or Illinois, winning like a 24-20 sort of game in that sort of range. I got to thinking about this because, I'm thinking about Oregon all the time, of course, but I also got a question from Blazer Duck, an everydayer out there, who I appreciate, who said, Spencer, Oregon's confidence has to be at an all-time high right now. Do you predict Oregon will go undefeated the rest of the season? I do. Yes, I do. But how would that not happen? As I just said. Now, making a slight, shall we say, branching off from that particular point, not completely disconnected. But another question he sent in was, here's my question, with the offensive line now being a strength of this team, when Matthew Bedford comes back, should we expect to see him come off the bench and not mess with the starting lineup? I would think so. Matthew Bedford was expected to be a starter coming into the season, but the offensive line, it's about chemistry. You've got to have 5 guys who know when they're going to climb to the second level coming off of a double team, and they have their communication shored up. That's probably the most important thing. And once you find that right the right ingredients, once you start, tweaking with the recipe, something I do very often in my own kitchen because I love to cook. If any of you do out there, I will talk with you about food for even longer than I'll talk with you about the Ducks, quite frankly. I love to cook. But when I make a recipe for the first time, I make it and I say, I think this should change a little bit, or I think they had too much of that, or not enough of this, or I want to add this other ingredient in there. But then once you get it right, you don't touch it. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. And Oregon's offensive line, it's not broken. It's not as if I'm supremely disappointed in the running game. I just think there's another gear. We've seen glimpses of it, but Oregon has seldom been over 200 yards rushing this season. And most of the rushing yards are also coming from Jordan James. So can Noah Whittington find a consistent rhythm? Does Jaden Lamar or Jay Harris work their way up the depth chart? Does Dylan Gabriel start to become more of a runner as the season progresses? I don't know. It's not as if the offense is struggling. They've scored over 30 points in every game since the first one against Idaho, of all teams. Think about that. Idaho held Oregon on the same field to fewer points than Ohio State. College football, go figure. But I like where this Oregon team is at. I still like their chances to go undefeated. And yeah, the offensive line is a significant reason why. Like, it's nice to watch Oregon again and be in the mindset for a third straight year of quarterback got sacked? What? That doesn't happen. What happened? Was there... Did the other team have 12 guys on the field this time? Because if so, make sure we throw the flag. And we'd like to reset the clock because we can do that now. That's where Oregon's offensive line is at. But in the running game, against Purdue, again, it wasn't a liability. You can have some play action passes, but the strength of that offense is the way Dylan Gabriel's slinging it to an incredibly talented wide receiving corps. So I wonder if they can find another gear, or if there's a team that gets back to, what Oregon was earlier in the year against Idaho and a little bit against Boise State, where they struggled to run the football. Let me know your thoughts in the YouTube comments, or hit me up on X, formerly known as Twitter, at @McLaughlinCFB or at LockedOnDucks. Dan Lanning made a jump as a head coach from year 1 to year 2. And one of the reasons I thought he could go 12-0 this year is, well, I think he's going to make another jump. And he is, and it's a great thing to see. And also, he said something hilarious to my guy Jared Mack. That is coming up next. Hey, Locked On Ducks fans, it's time to recognize the Roy Player of the Week. So far this season, we've pulled over $20,000 to support players on Roy. Micro deposits lead to massive change. With the Roy app, you can direct your support to the athletes you love, ensuring that all funds go to the specific player that you choose. Unlike collectives, you know exactly where your support is going, and you even receive exclusive content like personal videos and updates after the season. My Roy Player of the Week for Oregon this week, I'm going defense here. Mateo Uyunglele. I mean, he's everywhere. He's racking up sacks and TFLs every single week at this point. And this guy's a true sophomore. Just remember. Just remember. He also, remember this is my favorite part about Mateo. He lost a star. Remember, he was a 5-star when he committed to Oregon and then was just a high 4-star by the time he got on campus. Yeah, looks like a 5-star player to me. If you want to support him in the NIL space, Roy is the place to do it. Download Roy now and join the NIL game with no subscriptions and no fees. Be sure to check him out on Instagram, Facebook, and X at Roy_ReturnOnYou for more info. Roy, support the players, change the game. I really like Dan Lanning. I keep liking him more and more. So, my guy Jared Mack of the Odds and Audibles podcast 24/7, friend of the show, an Oregon baseball savant. asks a question earlier this week in Dan Lanning's press conference about what it means to have Oregon ranked number 1, which hasn't happened in a very long time. And Dan looks at him, smiles, and goes, "Who cares?" And I was like, oh, you didn't have to do my guy dirty like that. But I love that mindset, frankly. Doesn't mean anything. It's got to mean something to him, but it clearly doesn't mean very much because he was right to it. There was no, there's no dance. There was no word salad in there. It was just, who cares? He doesn't care. He's got one goal in mind, and we all know what that goal is, and he's incredibly capable of achieving it. If you want a question answered here on the show, YouTube comments, X formerly known as Twitter, or you can get priority access and a bunch of other perks if you become a Locked On Ducks insider. Link in the description below. You can get a free 14-day trial. Then it's just $5 a month. Brandon asks, "Hey Spencer, question for the podcast. At this point in the season, what would you consider the strength of this team, offense or defense? I think we're starting to see a shift in identity compared to the last 2 years under Nix. Doesn't seem like we're trying to outscore people anymore in the same fashion." Well, they are trying to score more points than the other team. "And for the love of the football gods, Dan, take the points. Your defense is good enough this year." So I think that Dan Lanning came to Oregon, and I had higher expectations for that first year on the defensive side of the ball. And I was kind of disappointed. And then in the second year, there was a jump, and it was sizable. And you went, oh, okay, he's starting to bring in the guys he feels like he needs to run this system effectively. This is going well. And now here we are in year 3, and despite losing the late Kyrie Jackson, RIP forever and always, my man, Brandon Dorlus, who's an NFL draft pick, and several other starters, the defense is better. And that's a good thing to see, because when you bring in a head coach, he brings an area of specificity that he was known for at his previous stop. For Dan Lanning, that was being a defensive coordinator. For Mario Cristobal, it was being an offensive line coach. For Chip Kelly, it was being an offensive coordinator. When you install somebody like that into the head coaching position, rather quickly, you would like to see them get that area right. So you know it wasn't a fluke, there wasn't another assistant somewhere, or they weren't just riding the wave of the system at the previous place. Like the area that guy was in charge of, he is indeed very good. And Dan Lanning is clearly really good. And I'm going to talk about Tosh Lupoi here in just a second. But I think the identity of this Oregon team does start on the defensive side of the ball, which is not to say I don't like the offense, because when you score at least 30 points in every game, boy, you're going to give yourself a chance to win every single football game. But there has been a shift, and that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. It's just when your head coach has that background, you're going to take on the identity of that guy eventually, and you want to see that. And by the way, the Mario Cristobal teams did that. What was the biggest strength of that team? The offensive line. They recruited that position well. They played incredibly well, and it was essential to Oregon having success. That O-line was really, really good. And this defense for Dan Lanning and company is really, really good. And I remember when, the staff was first assembled back in 2022 and Tosh Lupoi was the defensive coordinator, there were questions because he hadn't been a defensive coordinator in a while. And the last time he had been, Nick Saban said, "I don't want you to be the play caller anymore during the season." That's not a ringing endorsement. Tosh Lupoi deserves a lot of credit. They've been showing him a lot on the broadcast, and he and co-DC Chris Hampton, it's a collaborative effort, and Dan Lanning's involved as well, but Tosh Lupoi is the head defensive coordinator, and those guys are putting together one heck of a defensive season here. Just pitched the first shutout Oregon football has had defensively since 2012. So I think there's a 55-45 lean because of how Dylan Gabriel's playing right now towards the defense. And in a year or two's time, that could be 60-40. I mean, next year, you're looking at the prospect of starting Dante Moore or Austin Novosad. Defense is going to have to be great. And I thought the defense had to take a step forward this year for Oregon to reach its full potential, because I don't think Dylan Gabriel can carry the way that Bo Nix did. And Dylan Gabriel is playing exceptionally well. But the defense has taken a step forward, and that's just maximizing the way that this team is capable of playing. And I think that's a really good thing to see. So, yeah, I think there's an edge identity-wise on the defensive side of the ball. And I think that is Dan Lanning's vision coming to reality. I almost said fruition, and that was just going to be a bad rhyme, and I wasn't about it. But when you look at where Dan Lanning was last at Georgia, you watch them and think, oh yeah, they're a defensively led team, but the offense is really good too. And they've got a great quarterback, and they've got explosive playmakers, and Oregon has that. So that's what he has seen. That's what he knows. That's what he's been working to build. And boy, that plan seems to be coming to fruition right now. And it's a really good thing. Krondianic asks, I have a mailbox question. Not mailbag, mailbox. I would give out my mailing address, but that would be, let's just say, unwise given the number of people that listen to and watch this show. Will you finally admit that moving to a 12-team playoff was the correct move for college football? It has made the season more exciting, hands down, with so many teams vying for a playoff spot in seeding. It was about time for college football to enter the 21st century with real postseason format, just like every other major team sport. I'm going to answer the next question that I got, which is a shorter response, and I'll end with that one. The next question was, how well will Oregon fans travel the rest of this year? You tell me, but I know of a lot of people that are going to try and get to that Michigan game. Michigan, Wisconsin, those are legit road games. I hope Oregon fans travel well. It's great to see them at Purdue. I wasn't there personally, but I saw them on TV. I have no idea how they're going to travel. That's up to all of you out there. You have the ability to go to Oregon games every week. I hope to get to another one at some point this season. We'll just have to wait and see. And I'll keep you all updated as always. But back to the question about the 12-team playoff. No, I have not shifted my position. Spencer, you're just being stubborn. Spencer, you're just being annoying and doubling down on this. I have had the same take on the college football playoff. You can go back and listen to my remarks at the time. I'm going to say them again right here. I do not deny the 12-team playoff has good components and things I will enjoy. Home campus playoff games. Phenomenal. Absolutely phenomenal. I can make the argument they should have been doing that in the 4-team playoff. The home team or a higher seed gets the home playoff game, and then it's a neutral site for the national championship to be played at the Rose Bowl every year, the greatest venue in all of college football. That sounds like a pretty good system to me. I'd be on board with that. I'd still go back to it. But there are good things about it from a viewership standpoint, and there are great things about it for Oregon. Their access to the playoff. You know what Oregon is on FanDuel to make the college football playoff right now? Minus 3,500. They wouldn't be that big of a favorite. That's, for those that don't understand gambling odds, that means you'd have to bet $3,500 to win 100. Yeah. So they got a good chance to get in. It is good for Oregon. There are good things about it. But you will not get me to come off of the position because I still feel this particular sense that it minimizes key high-profile regular season games. Take Oregon, Ohio State, for instance. Ohio State still controls its own destiny even after losing to Oregon. And it was a huge win for the Ducks. I was shaken after they won. I was incredibly excited. Many of you saw the video of me record myself as I'm running out to my car. And I still felt all of that. And it was great. But if Oregon had lost, that loss would not have been as crushing as the loss to Washington last year because Oregon still would have controlled their own fate to get in the playoff. Alabama has already lost twice. They've lost twice. They can still get into the playoff and they don't need any help. I still resent that component of college football. In past years, Alabama right now in October would be done as a college football playoff team. Not anymore. And I lament that implication. And we have opened the door for more teams to get in the playoff. Yay, hooray, this team in X, Y, and Z. If you're not pushing to be one of the top 4 teams at the end of the year, I am yet to see a season outside of last year when Georgia missed the playoff where a team that isn't in the top 4 by the end of it is capable of winning a national championship. If you wanted to go to a 16 playoff, fine. I wouldn't have pushed back on that. Is it going to be fun? Yes, there are going to be fun components. But my fundamental disagreement is still there. It is still there. That you could have a team not want to play in a conference championship because it actually hurts their opportunity to make the playoff makes my entire point. They're like, well, why do we want to play this? Actually, we'd rather do it. Yeah, that's never what college football's been all about. So I'm not getting on and like, you asked a question, I'm always going to answer said questions. That's how it works here on the show. That's how the mailbag operates, and I'm a man of my word for that. I'm not yelling at the sky on every show. I'm not lamenting it I'm lamenting it privately every week. Like, that doesn't mean as much as it used to. There are other games that mean more, so that teams can get in the playoff that have no chance of winning a national championship. So, no, I have not changed my opinion on the 12-team playoff. But it's great for Oregon, so at least there is that. Why can't Oregon figure out special teams? That's coming up next. NFL fans, you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. It's America's #1 sportsbook. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. $200 guaranteed. 200. You don't even have to be right. You just have to go out there and do it at FanDuel.com. That's the place to go. And Oregon, in their first game in 12 years, is the #1 team in all of the land. Plays number 20 Illinois, minus 21.5, according to our friends at FanDuel. Oofta. That's a big number. Do you think Oregon's just going to come out and make a statement? Do you think Oregon's going to come out and not be able to handle the pressure? Whichever way you feel, you go bet it over at FanDuel.com. Whatever score prediction comes out from me on this show with regards to the spread, betting against that this year has been a pretty profitable endeavor. Make of that what you will. Just make sure you head over to FanDuel.com. I think some of you out there are going to be driven absolutely insane by my college football playoff take. Not backing down. Was never going to. Always admitted there were good things. Outweighed by me by the negative things. Garrick asks this set of questions. You mentioned two things that I was thinking through the entire game on the reaction pod: referees and the broadcast crew. I want to know, which do you think was worse? Referees have a much harder job. That broadcast was entirely inexcusable. I'd say the broadcast crew was worse. I asked last week, and I really wish I never had to ask this question again. What is wrong with our kicking game? Oh, come on. Andrew Boyle missed a 51-yard field goal. Is Oregon cursed? Well, yeah, duh. Is it the fancy cleats? Do our guys not practice kicks? This question, I'm only halfway through reading it, by the way, is just littered with way too much pain and psychological damage from past sports fan trauma. In a row. What's wrong with our kicking game? Is Oregon cursed? Is it the fancy cleats? Do our guys not practice kicks? 2 weeks ago, I was ecstatic, as you were too. Oregon hit a 50-yard kick. Now, I don't trust them on half our PATs. I don't know what we did to deserve this fate, but Atticus was named Automaticus, I didn't know that, at Oregon State for a reason, and now his fall-off is very noticeable. So, here's what I'll tell you on this. The special teams woes for Oregon in the place kicking game, in no way, shape, or form, in no way, and I know this is hard to believe, they are not limited to Eugene. I promise you they are not. Pat McAfee, who I'm not a huge fan of, but he has his moments. One of them is this kicking challenge on College Game Day. I love it. As someone who, the highlight of my football playing career, which was only in middle school because I was small and not fast in elite combination, I was good at kicking the ball because I played soccer for a long time. And I could still kick a ball pretty well. You get me on that game day thing, I'm making that field goal. But he has brought attention to people coming out to kick who have talked crap about kickers in their private lives. And everyone has experience with that. You notice everywhere you go on game day, wherever they are, fans will say, yeah, I've said bad things about kickers before. You know why? There aren't a lot of good ones out there. There legitimately are not. And you can gauge when you go and scout somebody or watch his film, wow, he can hit from 50. Hey, he can hit 55. Yeah, without pads on, without another team out there, Camden Lewis can hit from 55. But you can't fully measure what happens on the 1 square foot of real estate where it matters between the ears until a guy is in that sort of situation. But to think, like, yes, Oregon has had a myriad of special teams problems over the years. We're not the only ones. The greatest dynasty in the history of the sport, Alabama, has had bad kickers. I mean, bad kickers. Couldn't make a 56-yarder, turned it into one of the most iconic plays in the history of the sport, the kick six. Like, college kickers, it's such a mental thing. It's such a mental thing. And these are kids. These are kids dealing with an absurd amount of pressure, and you don't have the opportunity like a quarterback who throws an incompletion to just, all right, go get the next one. No, you miss a kick in a game, you got to go to the sideline. You got to sit with it. You got to sit with it for a while. Coaches call timeouts to ice you and make you think about it. And it's an incredibly technical situation, and it is based on timing. You got to have a good snap, good hold. Laces got to go out, and it's got to go up quickly. It is a difficult thing to pull off, but to say that Oregon has been uniquely challenged in the special teams department, not accurate. Have they had some blunders that shouldn't happen over the year? Yeah, of course. I can just assure you, go talk to fans of any other fan base. I assure you they can come up with special teams horrors. I guarantee it. I guarantee it. College kickers, EA College Football 25 is really fun. One thing that's incredibly realistic, hey, kicking's really hard. Yeah, that's because college kickers miss a lot. It is an adventure. It is just the way it is. So no, I don't think there's anything unique about Oregon. They've had some high-profile moments, but then there have been several years where kickers have been really good. Morgan Flint was really good. Rob Beard was pretty solid. Aiden Schneider was great. Henry Cattleman, when he was the kicker, was phenomenal. Like, there have been good kickers. It's just you remember the bad ones because it stands out in the worst way. That was a lot of special teams talk. So why don't we get back to the third question? Look at the trio of questions people coming up with here from Garrick. Did the offensive line performance worry you at all against Purdue? I realize it was a short week and that can cause strange things to happen. However, they missed a few blitzes, also attributed to the absence of Jordan James and Tiefer. I agree with that. And didn't look how they did against Ohio State. While the game turned out great, our ground game was not working at all without Jordan James in the backfield, seemingly because our front was getting pushed in the backfield. So yeah, I think Noah Whittington has not been the same guy he used to be. I also don't think he's as bad as a lot of Oregon fans, or some Oregon fans at least, make him out to be, just because, number one, running back is a hot hand sort of deal. Like, if you're not in a consistent rhythm, it can be really, really hard to have a lot of really quality runs. That's number one. But number two, I watch the offensive line when he's in the game, and I don't know what the problem is. But the holes are not there. When he has had opportunities to break big runs, he's broken them. Oregon State, it's not as if he lost his burst entirely. He's got a kickoff return for a touchdown, long touchdown run against Oregon State. I think what happened more than anything in the Purdue game, Oregon gets a 3-touchdown lead, and coaches can say, no, we keep guys focused. We do that. These are 18 to 22-year-old kids, or, sometimes 20. How old's Gabriel? 24, 25, something like that. They can get complacent. And I think that's what happened. Oregon went up 21-0. They're like, oh, we're way better than these guys. And you lose that edge. Why didn't that happen against Ohio State? Because you never lose the edge. It's a dogfight. It's a slugfest. It's a back and forth, go either way, high profile, big stakes game. Once Oregon went up 21-0, they knew, yeah, they're going to win the football game. And I think Purdue made some adjustments, but it's why I talked about the offensive line earlier. If Oregon were to lose a game this year, I think the two things that would coincide are someone takes away the running game completely and Dylan Gabriel has an off game. Because if Dylan Gabriel has an off game, I don't know that the offense can be ground-centric the way it would need to score a bunch of points, and it would at least be more competitive. So not worried, but I am monitoring, shall we say, when I watch Oregon, as I will be this Saturday, of course. Appreciate everyone listening. I'll see you next time. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and go Ducks.